Okay, so guys, welcome once again. This is the fifth or sixth or seventh session this month, I think. This time we have Alex Senechal with us. Uh, in my personal opinion, one of the best hard surface modeler who is doing specific things like weapon design and futuristic weapon design and that kind of stuff. So I myself have tons of questions for him. Of course, I won't ask all of it today. You can also post your questions here. Before we continue, I just want to inform you that Alex will also join us at this year's IFCC event in Split, Croatia, in June, 24th to 29th of June. He'll be joining as one of the instructors and demo artists. And if you want to join, check the IFCC website. Here I'm typing the address. And that being said, I guess we can continue. Alex, can you please introduce yourself? What have you been doing lately and that kind of stuff?
So, basically, I do a lot of hard surface stuff. Lately, like past year and a half, I've been mostly freelancing. I worked at 343, and I primarily do hard surface design, but I also do, some sculpting and other things like that. I started as a game artist, and now I do just mostly hard surface concept design and some 2D stuff. But yeah.
So I myself, being as one of those soft-hearted liberal guys who doesn't like weapons, still can't say anything against what you're doing. I'm kind of really stoked with the quality of models that you produce and renders and all this with your imagination. I don't know. Since I also work in 3D a lot. Some of your works still puzzle me, how did he achieve it, I'm also using Fusion 360 sometimes, and I would definitely like to see some of your processes. I know that recently you have announced some new Gumroad tutorials, if I remember correctly, and you also have some old ones. So can you please right away let us know like what's new in those new tutorials? What do they cover?
Yeah, for sure. So I did a design basics tutorial. I was talking about basically visual design, and I had a really rough, quick demo about making a gun in Fusion, but it wasn't about Fusion. It was just the design process. And so, like, a lot of people thought, oh, it was a Fusion tutorial, but it's not. It's just a demo in Fusion about design. And so I decided recently to make a quick introduction to Fusion. And so I decided to make something simple and small that people could follow along with, this grenade. And basically in the tutorial, you're doing the grenade case is a separate tutorial. It's a bit more simple, slower, and a simpler object. And then the next tutorial, is following along making this hand grenade based off of a drawing that I did. So, yeah, I just kind of wanted to give people an introduction. It's not really that in depth, but right now, at the moment, I'm working on some more complicated stuff in Fusion that, if you don't mind, I was gonna, show some people. So, if you guys want to see it.
Definitely, yes.
All right, yeah. So, recently I've been doing more complicated things like this mech, and it's for a client, but I got permission to show it in a live stream. And so this mech is basically for, I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about exactly what it's for, but let me show. It's only a part of the mech. And then I also have some pictures just to give you an example of like what I've been doing in Fusion. So I got some quick renders from the keyshot viewport. I haven't done final renders yet, but just to show it completed, it has 3 different arms and some other stuff.
Mm-hmm. So Fusion for modeling and then Keyshot for rendering, those are your tools of choice, right? For those who are not into, because I know a lot of hard surface modelers are using like modeling apps like 3ds Max, Maya, Blender, and so on. Even ZBrush. In recent years, more of them are using ZBrush. So can you just explain like the main differences between working in a CAD software like this and and those other softwares that I just mentioned?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I started in 3ds Max, and I still model in Max actually quite a bit. It's really based upon what I need. When I'm doing more organic stuff, I'm going to be definitely using ZBrush or Max. But when it comes to pure hard surface stuff, I tend to like Fusion a bit more. I find that there's a lot of forms and shapes that would be more time consuming and just a waste of your life to do in a Max, and so it's just a lot of times I'm using Max for blockout because it's and somewhere between sculpting and polymodeling.
Mm-hmm.
It has a There's a lot of things that are way faster. You just have to change how you're thinking about working on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I also find that just the speed that you can turn around in a design is worth it way more than using a polymodeling program.
Mm-hmm. Do you use these splines at all in a Fusion 360?
No, I don't,
No,
to be
too
honest.
slow.
I just haven't had time to really play with it. I'm mostly just
Mm-hmm.
working with solids and trying to see how far I can push, more complicated forms. But the speed that I can finish stuff compared to before is just a drastic change. I can do like something like a gun in a day.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Uh, so what I really like about this tool, I've been testing like I have this mania of testing all kinds of software that I can get my hands on, and uh, what I like about this tool is that it's so simple to use and so simple to get to start working with. So I remember I really needed no introductions to it for the basic operations. So uh, you start with just simple like drawing. For example, if you want to draw a cube or make model a cube, you just draw a rectangle and then extrude it, and then do booleans and so on. And if I remember correctly, you can't have, for example, like two objects that are separate. They can't be one, what we call in other applications like one mesh. They have to be connected to be one object. Am I correct, right? Uh, and then what's also cool, you can also like connect multiple files into one scene, and then also like edit them separately, which is kind of pretty cool if you're working in teams, so everyone can work on its own part of the model.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
I really like the cloud aspect of Fusion. At first, I wasn't entirely sure about it, but I think for me the thing that I like the most is that there's so many operations that you can do in Fusion that would be slow in MOE, for example,
Hmm.
and also 3ds Max. Like for example, I remember when I first started using Fusion. Like normally when you're beveling in a 3D program, this type of thing is normal, but you can't go past other edges, and
Hmm.
there's just so much more forms that you can play with. But I think a lot of people are still struggling to understand, well, not just modeling, polymodeling, because there's so many people who are still struggling with edge flow and understanding how to control forms. But in Fusion, it's the same thing. And so I see a lot of people getting into CAD softwares like MOE or Fusion or whatever, but they're still struggling with the same problems. So that's kind of why I made the tutorials, because I wanted to help people start to see the order of operations. The most important thing when you're doing hard surface modeling is always the order of operations. So many people, especially people just starting out, are adding all of their bevels first. They're going right into the details and they want to see it all, and it's perfectly acceptable. When you see something in a blockout stage, it's usually not the best looking thing, but you have to kind of learn through working. It's just like sculpting, right? Like you don't go right into the nose if you haven't defined the forms of the face, for example. It's like exact same thing. So I kind of was hoping that this tutorial would show some of the power of Fusion for getting those base forms versus something like MOE or maybe polymodeling, and also the parallels between the different softwares. So I think that Fusion offers something unique that Moe doesn't exactly. I spent a lot of time in Moe, maybe, I don't know, a year, trying to feel comfortable in the software, and I never felt like it was the right software for me. In Fusion, you can do stuff like push and pull faces. You can delete stuff that would be very, very difficult to delete in Moe. There's just so much more freedom. The bevel system is way more advanced, and so while there are good uses for Moe, I can't recommend like how much better I think Fusion 360 is and can be in the future.
Well, I guess it's I also I like Moe, but Fusion seems like a more serious software. So, uh, and you mentioned some limitations. I don't think, at least in previous versions of Moe, you couldn't do some like serious testing. Like for 3D printing if you're working on something for production and so on. And also, which is really cool with Fusion, and even if it's just for your own tests, you can do like animation simulations. You can connect joints. So, for example, that other model that is shown us of that aircraft or whatever it was, I guess you can make it. Everything can be connected and functional. So. And this is also something. I think it's just like a more serious software. Um, when did you get so fascinated with weapons? I guess it's something from the childhood, but can you share us a bit more on that? And why science fiction stuff? Like, why not World War II or whatever?
To be honest, I don't even know why I'm making weapons. A lot of people only think of me as a weapons guy, and to be honest, I'm really not. I just make guns, and I don't really
And
have
you
a.
and you
I
sell them.
have no reason for why I'm doing it. I just am. I actually want to make way more variety of things. That's what I'm working on right now. Right now, I'm making, character or full size like battle mech, and well, also some guns. But
Well, at the moment, your portfolio is like full with guns, So I guess maybe that's the reason.
yeah,
Why-
well, I mean, last time I looked, I've done, I don't know, I think 13 or 14 guns just
uh,
in my portfolio, and I'm working on another one right now. But as far as science fiction, I was really enjoying like Halo and just sci-fi stuff when I was growing up, especially Halo. Halo
was
was,
this red helmet was also done in Fusion or?
it's a mix, but it's mostly actually
Mhm,
poly modeling. So
mhm,
that's,
mm. Okay.
yeah. This is infusion, and this is also for that goes with that helmet,
Mhm,
but it's a different piece. And it's just a test render, so I'll show more about that someday. But
uh-huh. Okay, this looks pretty amazing. For those who haven't seen, you have like few videos on YouTube discussing about some design principles and that kind of stuff. Uh, I I watched most of it, and I'm pretty amazed, like the way you talk about this design. Like uh, I really feel like you understand what you're saying. Uh, and if I was like a, a young student, I'd definitely like to attend one of your classes, because just by watching those videos, uh, I realized that there are some things that I didn't pay attention to while designing. So is this your future? Do you see yourself as a teacher in the future, like making a living just by doing your designs to teach others?
uh, I don't know. I enjoy teaching people, but I also like usually having. I'm always giving people feedback, like all the time online. I think it's really important, not just for me. When you're giving people feedback, you're also learning how to solve other people's problems, which are maybe problems you had never considered. And so when you're giving people feedback, you're also learning yourself. And I think it's one of the most important things. But I also want to say, one of the reasons why I feel like I talk about design the way that I do and that I learned a lot is I had a really good foundation.
Hmm.
So I worked with this guy, if you can see on my art station,
Hmm.
Jihoon,
Hmm.
and
This
he,
is Halo era.
yeah, he's one of
Mhm.
the smartest, most awesome people I ever met. Before I started working at 343, I was actually really inspired by this space, and I had no idea that he made it. And I did some fan art of it, and I put it in my portfolio, and it was garbage. It was like the worst art you could imagine, and I had no idea. Anyway, when I applied, I found out that the guy who was interviewing me, this was like the level that he worked on and all of this stuff. And anyways, after that, I started working with Jehoon, and he helped me to see design as more of a byproduct of human psychology and environment rather than just some I don't know, abstract reasons and rules. Like there's actually a reason why humans perceive certain forms and certain things like better than others. There's not a randomness to it.
Mhm.
It's something that I find fascinating. Anyways, I just wanted to say that, so I just expanded upon a lot of the fundamentals that he taught me, but yeah, I just want to give credit to him for a bit. But
I mean, it's good that you touched that because, for example, like someone, I mean, you're like probably all working day every day into 3D design, and so maybe someone who might be watching, like someone who's maybe doing, I don't know, like architectural visualization and stuff like that, and maybe if he or she would see like a Halo type of this environment design, and maybe that person would say, okay, this is just some, extending some objects, skewing and extruding. Uh, but it's actually not that, to make it functional and to make it a space where you can like walk into, and go into different corridors, you still have to apply some rules, and uh, I know I was one of such people who started testing this type of forms and then realized that it's not that easy, and so I guess some design principles are applied to it. So when you approach this kind of, either if it's a gun or environment, like what are the rules, like, like some basic rules that you already follow by instinct,
well, I think it's okay. So, how do I answer this? Basically, I think there's a few things. One, I think that context, like for example, when let's say you're designing something for a movie, or maybe designing like something that's not pure sci-fi shapes and just some cool BS, like something that has a purpose. So if you're designing maybe a suit outfit for a 1950s mechanic,
hmm
you're gonna have a different set of priorities for what design rules you follow. But for like the spaces, for example, in Halo or just some sci-fi stuff like this, I always try to find a balance between shapes and form. But I think that the thing that helped me the most to get good at design, and I'll touch on your question in a second, I think the thing that helped me the most to improve on design is there's so many people who are trying to just rush into making these complicated things like merging form and function.
hmm
Like what is form? Form is pure shape. It's pure abstraction. It's That's it. And then the function is what gives that abstraction uh, context. They work together and they mix. But if you focus on either function or only form, I think that you'll become better at both of those topics. So to give an example, when I first started at 343, I never really chose to do this alien stuff. But what I realized is that because I had so much freedom of shape and form and all this stuff, it wasn't constrained by, oh, well, how does this joint work? How does this work? It's like, it's tech magic BS. So I can do whatever I want. The only thing I have to think about is, are the shapes working together? Is the flow good? Is it cool looking? I didn't have to think about context. And so the types of rules that go into it are a lot of the stuff that I cover in my tutorials, but also just fundamental art rules, balance, 70-30, big hierarchy. Hierarchy, almost all of these things, shape, contrast, all of this stuff really has to do with the there's this idea that basically humans prioritize information through hierarchy. And most design rules go back to this, at least abstract design rules. And so basically the human brain, when it sees things, whether it's shape, size, volume of like loudness, whatever, it's always prioritizing the importance based on all sorts of different markers of understanding these objects around it. And so basically, like let's say you look at a mountain, right? In real life, your brain isn't thinking about just the trees and the rocks and all the small things on it. It takes the idea of a mountain when you see a mountain from far away and it says, "Oh, that's a mountain." But when you're close to it, your brain is like, "Oh, look at all of these trees and these rocks and stuff." So in design it's the same type of thing. It's like, you have more rest space than detail. So your brain says, "Oh, it's more clean than busy," or "This shape is bigger than that one," and they give each other purpose and contrast. So it's a really big topic, but I think like the basic idea is that the human mind and hierarchy for the most part are the most important things in visual design. So if you're making shapes and it's all mushy, it's going to look bad. But if you have 70% mushy shapes or like soft shapes and 70% sharp shapes, it's going to be looking nicer and more clear to the brain. So sorry if that's a long-winded answer, but
No, no, no. That's why we're here. So when we talk about hierarchy and working together with our people uh, for a bigger project like a Halo game or whatever, uh, very often actually you're not working alone on a specific model. At least you have to have some kind of a game Bible or a handbook with some rules set there. So uh, do you have this problem when you don't like the instructions, and you have like maybe better idea for something? How does this work in an environment, when you work with others who are above or below you? I'm purely asking this because of some much younger folks who are here, who are just looking for their way into the films or games industry. Uh, how do you find the middle, the compromise in those situations?
so to be honest, it really depends on a lot of different things. It depends on what you're working on. It depends who you're working with, how much they trust you in whatever matter that you're working on. There's a lot of things that go into play. So I mean, for me, I won't say a lot about the production process that I experienced, but I'll just say on at least this Halo game, I had a lot of freedom, almost complete freedom. And if there was something I disagreed with, I would always bring it up. I'd always try and offer a better solution or like a reason why I think this, prove my point. There's two things to it. So, one, I just want to say, if you're starting out in the industry or if you're starting at a studio, don't be too shy. You understand that you're just starting, but also voice your opinions. One of the things that a lot of studios look for are people who can lead. So if you think that your ideas are better, always speak up about it and try and show it. Don't be, an asshole about it, but be genuine. And then the other one is, on Halo, for example, I actually started out and I was not that good. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea about design. I didn't even realize how big of a topic it was. I didn't have much experience with tiling textures, but by the end, I had the freedom to design everything that I made. I designed the end of the game in Halo 5. I designed how this whole thing worked. I designed the animations, I rigged it, all of this stuff, and all the props for it, the outside. And so, basically, if you're starting out, I think just if you think you have a better idea, try and make your point, or at least prove it. Put that extra effort in.
So, can you please stay on this design that you had open with the environments?
Yeah,
Uh, how far, how far do you have to push this? Is this like an in-game visual
yeah,
here? So this is the done job.
yeah.
Uh, if something is movable in the scene, you your job is also to like present it that way to to the guys who approve things. if there's some animation involved, like with doors or I don't know, like stairs or whatever. Is, is this something that you also do? I mean, for the showing to the rest of the team, or do you have someone else who does that?
So I mean, it depends entirely on your studio setup. I don't work at a studio anymore. I'm only doing I'm only working for myself. But during this time, I knew the rigging pipeline good enough,
Hmm.
and I could do some basic mechanical animations, and so I basically would work with gameplay. We were designing how the game is ending. The not just the story of the space, but how it's working in the context of the narrative and all this stuff. So I'm working with effects, sound design, gameplay, and all of the teams that are involved in making this. But as the person creating the space, I help to define all of this stuff. And yeah.
Personal projects. Are you working on anything for yourself, like a bigger thing?
Yeah, I have, some bigger personal projects in the works, but they're like really, really early stages. So I haven't actually had time to work exactly on them. Most of my personal projects have just been focused on speed, but right now I'm working on a Kitbash set
Hmm.
and I'm trying to find a style for it. I have a few pieces maybe I could show.
Yeah, please do.
All right, I have it.
This will be distributed through Gumroad or.
Yeah, but first I'm gonna make some portfolio pieces with them and finish it.
Hmm.
So maybe in a few months it'll be available. I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, so I mean I have like one piece here. I'm still trying to find a style. And it's just some simple piece. I don't know exactly what it's gonna be just yet. What you'd use it for. That's why it's a kit bash set. I have a bunch of other pieces, circular bits,
Hmm.
random parts, etc. But
These are pieces like imagined in your head, or are they based on any real life thing?
to
Uh,
to be honest, I actually really struggle with looking at reference. It hasn't been until maybe this last year or so that I can look at reference a little bit better. I have reference up for this gun I'm working on at the moment,
hmm.
but I actually recently decided that I'm only going to oh I'm only going to take different just like screenshots of things that I like, just pieces, because I find that I'm going to only care about certain ideas in an image. But yeah, in general, most of my art I'm just kind of forgetting what I'm doing and making some shapes or whatever. I don't know. It's it's nice and it's also not nice at the same time, I guess. To have this not being good at reference thing.
Hmm. So this looks like it can be like a some kind of a spaceship, but then again also some small part for some, I don't know, oxbow or something like that.
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, that's kind of why I'm making a kit bash set though, right? So I can see what kind of things that I'll be able to make out of it. Am I gonna make a mech or I
How
don't
many
know.
of them? How many of them do you plan to do? Like how many pieces?
I have no idea, maybe 40, 50, 60, 120. It depends, I want to have basically a kit bash set for everything because I realize, making everything from scratch is an insane waste amount. It's just an insane amount of time wasted. I've also been building like Boolean libraries, these types of things, but I didn't really feel confident in building them until now. And it's helped me also get a lot better at Fusion.
So, uh, if I remember correctly, Fusion had some really cool rendering options as well. And I remember I managed to render something almost as good as in Keyshot. Okay, maybe things that are not too complicated. What is your experience with it? Do you use it at all?
Uh, the only reason that I'm using the internal renderer, and also because I have lighting setups that I've made in Keyshot that I'm really quick in, The only time I'm using this is Fusion has one thing that's dumb. Well, it has a few things, like most softwares, but one of them is basically you have to go up here and right click to change from orthographic to perspective.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's dumb. And so if you go from the design tab to render, it's instantly perspective.
Hmm.
And so it'll be perspective and it'll give you a quick idea of, how your model's looking, but not really. I've done some render studies in it just to, see what I could do with it, and they were looking okay for simple objects, but I don't really like Fusion's render to be honest. But it's
I rem-
it's okay. It's simple.
I remember that I had a problem with the rotating object in the scene. I guess middle mouse for that or something, but I just couldn't make it work. So I constantly had to rotate the little box top right to position.
Really.
Yeah, I don't
I had
know why was this.
so I've had an issue in Fusion that's super obnoxious where basically you'll be dragging and click and drag, and your camera will just start to fade off into nowhere, and you have to bring it back. It's
Oh,
super irritating, but I
there's
think
no there's not some like focus button or something.
yeah, if you double click your middle mouse button, it'll focus on your scene.
Hmm. Can you share a bit of your like workflow? How do you? I mean, if that's not too much to ask now, but how do you organize your scenes? Because I see that you have like tens, if not hundreds, of objects in it.
Yeah, so I'm trying to close this scene right now. It's
Uh,
unfortunate because this one's organized, so I'll screenshot it. But you can see here, basically, I have a component for everything. And the more that you break things into components, the better your performance in Fusion is going to be.
hmm.
I was going crazy for a while. I didn't understand that this was so important. And I guess it's maybe more of a basic thing, but once you start breaking things into components, it stops lagging so much and it makes your life so much easier.
So
Before it's just
are
group construction.
components actually separate files?
No, components aren't separate files. They're more like, to be honest, I don't know exactly how it's working underneath in the software level, but components are like basically your whole scene is one gigantic component.
Hmm.
If you look at how everything is listed, let me open a new version of Fusion because it's struggling just to close this file.
Hmm.
Oh, amazing. Let me see. Where's my computer's struggling a lot right now, but I'll show something. You're asking about my workflow in Fusion. So to be honest, it's the same thing as I'll just show these pictures while Fusion's struggling. It's the same thing as basically, polymodeling or whatever. You start with blocking out your forms and your shapes and the ideas. And so the gun I'm working on, actually, I've only spent 2.5 days on it. And this is, the first maybe half an hour. I
Hmm.
made this quick block out for proportion and idea. And then, okay, Fusion is back up. Let me open something. Let me open this gun. Oh, Fusion is actually working on both of them. Great. Or it's trying. Anyway, so let me make these smaller just for safety. Yeah, so I started on this gun, and you can tell it's super rough at the moment with this quick. God, I'm sorry about my computer.
No problem.
Yeah, so this quick block out, just a few finding the basic shapes, and then you just start trying to break into what you've already done, and add a little bit more detail. Add where you plan to place the details, placing the major things like this is an ejection port for the electronic shells, this is the magazine, this is the buttstock, trying to find a shape for the buttstock. It's like sculpting or anything else, work from big to small and as non-destructively as possible. So all separate objects, all of this stuff. Eventually, I start mixing all these objects. You can see they're not welded together at this point at all. Um, some of them are, but it's easy to fix them if you learn how.
So
And then
here at this point there are no you're really not going into details anywhere. There are no bells here, almost no booleans.
there's some stuff, like some of this stuff is all welded here. There's a lot of
Hmm.
pieces, but the most important thing in a software like Max, whatever, is just knowing how to undo things. Like,
Hmm.
you make a choice, do you know how to fix it if you need to reconstruct it? That's the most important thing. And so in Fusion, I actually feel as comfortable as I do in Max in reconstructing things now and making changes. And then so by the second day, this is where I was at the end of it, with this
Hmm.
design, and I made a lot of changes.
So let's say this is like 16 hours of work at this point.
Less,
Less, okay.
maybe, like, I don't know, 10,
Hmm.
12. Usually yeah, it depends. Some guns I've made in 6 hours or less, and some.
Can I interrupt you just a bit? So because I wonder about the design and functionality. Is this something that you worry a lot when you're doing like a science fiction models, sci-fi models, like futuristic models? Like, do you like take some measures from the existing guns, of a similar shape, just to see where the handle is and where the other hand will be holding the gun, or are you just like eyeballing here?
To be honest, yeah, a lot of times I'm just kind of eyeballing it. Sometimes I'm getting close measurements, like, if I'm working on a Picatinny rail or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
My computer's struggling so bad. Let me close this other Fusion. It's crying right now.
Hmm. No problem. Someone noticed that you're not using timeline. Uh, so like the which I guess means that there are no you can't go back and like get rid of something that you applied, like bevels and stuff. You have to like manually redo it. Is that the case here, or?
Yeah, but to be honest, oh, the timeline feature does nothing but slow you down a lot.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
a horrible nightmare because, like, let's say you want to delete a sketch or something simple like this, it'll cause some issues. All of your operations become interdependent, and that has to go with what I was saying about, knowing how to rebuild stuff. Like, let's say you make a bunch of bevels, or you need to add something to something that has bevels. So let me see. I should have an example of that, actually. My computer is struggling so bad. All 6 cores. But basically, yeah, basically it comes down to program mastery because, I at this point I know exactly 95% of the time. There's certain times where it's like it's not really easy to fix something, but most of the time I can fix most things. So why should I have this this timeline that I'm never using it. Like, I tried to use it and tried to be like, oh, this is cool, but I was really in the end hating it, and it slowed me down. So anyway, the point is, like, if you learn how Fusion works, how to mix,
Mhm.
bevels back together, all this stuff, you don't need this timeline feature
Mhm.
at all.
Uh, this was my experience as well. Uh, tried with something like really simple, like a bit more complicated version of a bracelet, which has
Hmm.
some, like parts and that kind of stuff. So, and yeah, I when I started deleting, like drawings, it just caused issues, because something else was affected. It's not like working with the modifiers in like Blender or Max, where you can like easily edit, like bevels and that kind of stuff, if you're using modifiers. So yeah, the only software I find better for this kind of direct modeling than Fusion maybe, but not talking about whole software, just this part of this push pulling and beveling and stuff, is the Space Claim. I don't know if you've heard of Space Claim.
I've
We
heard of it. I've never used it.
Yeah, we used it for like a year, and it's pretty amazing, but it has like some really weird pricing, so we just decided not to use it anymore. But yeah, anyway, someone asked here, like, do you ever like do sketches before you start working on a model, or are you just sketching in the 3D space?
Yeah, so I actually do sketches a lot, to be honest. It depends. Sometimes I'm just going right into 3D. You know, a lot of actually my portfolio is just straight into 3D, but I still like to sketch because oh my God, my computer is so slow. For example, like this grenade that I made for the tutorial,
Hmm.
you know, it helps me to get my bad ideas out and just get a direction at least. Um, it's different for every project. Some projects I'm not doing it at all. Some I'm just like, oh, enjoying it. And then some I really need to sketch it out first so that way I can at least have a clear idea of the base place to start. Because then you get an overview of like the whole project without just putting it in a 3D. But yeah, it just depends. Sometimes I'm doing ZBrush, everything, whatever it takes to get it how I want it.
You mentioned the grenade model. I know that it has like some kind of holes that are applied in a circular way around the grenade.
Yeah.
So was this first laid down as a sketch and then kind of made into oval, or was this just like, okay, so this shows how it's done. Okay, so objects were placed around the model and then the Boolean operation. Um, I remember I struggled like a lot. I needed to apply text on
Mm.
the curved shape, and I just couldn't make it. In the end, what I did is I kind of laid down the sheet, or how do you call it? I forgot how do you call it in the software. So I just laid down the curved surface as a flat, and then applied the letters, and then did the rapid around the model again. So, uh, do you ever have such situation where you have to like apply something, some kind of pattern, a more complex pattern around the curved surfaces in Fusion, and how do you solve it in these situations?
So I've had at least one or two situations like this. My computer is struggling so bad. I don't know why. But let me try to see. I'm waiting for Chrome to let me type ArtStation. Alright, so yeah. Let me see what is going on with my computer. It's horrible. It's Chrome. Alright, anyway, yeah, so I'm trying just to go to my profile. Alright. Takes like 5 seconds to click a button. Yeah, so for example, on this handgun design, I actually did all of it using booleans and individual objects.
Hmm.
And so basically what I'm doing it a lot of the time is I'm just making a duplicate of the negative shape of an object, if that makes sense. So
Uh-huh, yeah, of course.
I take the object, I put a box around it, I boolean the object out, and then I push the boundaries
Hmm.
of the boolean shape. Then I add the pattern, and then I boolean it with a negative shape.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that's how I got this pattern. It's really subtle, but
Hmm.
it's all geo. I want to experiment a bit more though with this and trying to get better results. It's slow and maybe not the best way, so
Is the because these are renders, is the keyshot bridge working well with Fusion?
to be honest, I'm never using this bridge stuff. I'm
Uh-huh.
actually assembling a lot of stuff in Max. So I
Uh-huh.
go from Fusion,
To Max, and
X,
then
then Moe. So then I go to
okay.
OBJ from Moe, and
Oh
then
yeah,
I go to Max.
with nicer topology, with nicer quads, or
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, also
yeah.
when you're doing this, it's so much faster to render than a
Yeah.
sub-G object. Sub-G
Yeah.
objects are dense as hell for no reason.
I remember that Moi had like really nice export for CAD models. I mean, as nice as they can get. Now, I don't know if you've seen like the video that they streamed yesterday for the new ZBrush and the new Z remesher options. You should check that out. Pretty nice geometry, because now it's pretty good at detecting sharper edges. So you get like some pretty nice quads from models.
Yeah,
Uh,
I really want to. I actually enjoy sculpting a lot more than hard surface,
oh,
but
really?
yeah, ironically, I don't do it that much. I really want to. Once I have a bit more time, I'm gonna spend a lot more time sculpting because it.
I enjoy doing art much more than doing festivals, but ironically, I don't do art.
Yeah, I know how this goes, you know.
So yeah, you started talking something about model, and then we were interrupted by the lag or something. So this is probably the final stage or the stage before final.
Yeah, I'd say that this is probably a day and a half left. I want to finish it tonight if I have the time, but actually, this is for a client who's given me, all of the things I've shown. I have permission to
Mhm,
show, so.
mhm. Okay.
But yeah, this is for, a client, and I am hoping to finish this tomorrow. So I'd say that, yeah, there's a lot that's block out, but it shouldn't be that much left, you know?
I see that you've gone really far with some beveling here on the sides, um, or how do you call this, chamfer, or I forgot how it's called in the fusion. There's chamfer, and
It's
then
a
there's
fillet and chamfer.
fillet and chamfer. Yeah. Then with filleting, this were the, oh fuck, I don't know in English how you call this, functional elements on the gun. Um,
Handle?
Probably not the handle, the thing with you like do the re. Ah, fuck, forget it.
It's all
Never
good.
mind.
My fusion crashed too, so I have to reload that again.
Okay, I'll forget about this question.
No, yeah, but I mean about bevels, I feel like I've gotten to a certain point with fusion. I usually work some places I'm refining sooner, like the front of the gun is almost done. There still needs a bit of polish and all of this to finish it off, but the back I also have some fillets, but if I feel like I don't like the choice, what I'll do is I'll go back to a previous file, copy over that part, cut it out, and then mix it back together with the latest version. So, I mean, if I make a mistake or whatever, it's not that big of a deal.
But my favorite part about CAD software is the fact that you kind of, you're not forced, but it's so logical to use real life measures. And I wish, that like modeling software, like we use most of the time, would have such a workflow that forces you to use the real life measure, because it just, it means so much to me when I know, and I realized that when I did the models for my one of my puzzle games,
Mm.
where I did a lot of puzzles, so it just, I just, it feels so good to to be able to say, okay, this pin that goes into this part will be like 5 millimeters long, and the fillet will be like 0.3, and this is something that I kind of miss in modeling software.
No, I agree. Actually, this is the first time I tried to stay a little bit closer to real world measurements. Because to be honest, a lot of times I'm just, eyeballing it. I'm making concept art. People aren't going in and measuring it like an engineer. But I think that it can also help with consistency. Like let's say you are doing bevels. Well, something that makes a design look nice is a consistent bevel size. Like not
Mhm.
all the bevels are the same, like some game artists are thinking, but like maybe on this type of metal treatment, this certain edges are zero point zero 0.03 edges, like
Mhm.
zero point 0.3 millimeters, and then on this piece of metal or this plastic, it's like this this size of an edge. But
Mhm.
yeah, I wish there was something that made it easier because to be honest, it's a bit frustrating. You just want to get into modeling. You don't want to sit there always and take the time to figure out the scale of everything.
Mhm.
So it is a bit annoying that there's not something that makes it a bit more streamlined.
The cool thing also about Fusion that I really like, and this is also I've noticed, something I've noticed while doing those puzzles, is that I can just select the whole model and apply bevels to all the edges, which, for something that maybe is not so complex as this gun, can be like really really cool when you what you just said, like where you have to have something which is more like uniformed.
No, I agree with you. There's actually okay. So to be honest, there's a few things I really liked about Moe. There's a lot I hate about Moe,
Hmm.
but some of the things where snapping is amazing.
Hmm.
The scale tools are about 1,000 times better
Hmm.
than in Fusion.
What do you mean by scale tools? Like for transforming the?
Just yeah, just to do a simple
Mm,
scale in
mm,
Fusion
mm,
is really dumb, you know. Like
mm.
let's say I have a circle. Let me draw a circle really quick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
It's
think I know
like
what you mean.
yeah, you know. So it's like, oh, scale. It picks
Yeah,
some
yeah, yeah,
dumb
I
point on.
remember that.
It's so stupid. It's
Yeah,
one of
yeah, yeah. And then you have to mark something and then check the icon
yeah.
in a floating window and then blah blah blah. Yeah, I remember that.
It's one of the dumbest things. And
Yeah.
then also, you know, Moe's better for OBJs. It's better for spreading detail really quickly.
Hmm.
But other than that, you know, Moe can't rotate a face like this. You know,
Hmm.
it can't do a lot of the things that Fusion can do. So to me, it's
Uh,
worth the trade-off.
this is why I mentioned the space claim before. We were even in contact with them like few years back with the people who were selling it, you know, and then we tried to convince them. This was like 5 years ago, and we tried to convince them to, you know, try to connect more with the concept art community and for games and films because it that software had so many. To be honest, I think they even got the Fusion team was kind of inspired by that software because it has so many things that uh, that this software has. But I'm not talking about uh, what you see in every other old CAD application. It had some. I think they were the first to have this like push and pull thing, you know,
Mm,
and theirs is much more, still more powerful than Fusion. But you know,
really?
yeah, but they just couldn't see it, you know, that way, the way we wanted to explain it to them. So I think that only later on, like few years later, when Fusion showed up and and so they started, you know, to doing some more kind of artistic models, you know, because some artists did start using them. I can't remember who, but some of the guys who are like pretty strong in the Fusion 360 community, they did some models in Space Claim. I'm not sure if they're still using it, but yeah, I just remember that they also had this like really cool tools. So yeah, so but you say like you use Moi a lot, and Moi
I
has like
used to.
yeah, okay, you used to. Moi has like an interesting story because the guy who made it, he was actually originally he was working in a team for the Rhinoceros Rhino 3D.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, he's actually one of the, if maybe one of not one of the founders, then one of the more important guys for the Rhino 3D. And the Moi is actually his own product. He's like, I think it's still like one team.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's the only guy. It's actually
yeah.
it's really fascinating. I remember, you know, going on the forums and it's like every day he's still responding to people's questions.
Mhm.
It's actually really amazing, but
And this is
yeah.
why it probably has this really good export of for OBJ because there's the same thing that works really well in Rhino. So I guess that's something that he
Mm,
did there as well. So
interesting. Yeah, I didn't know he
yeah.
came from Rhino. I know that so as far as Space Claim and Rhino, all I know people who are using Rhino right now is Lee
Hmm.
Souter for Grasshopper. And
Hmm.
then, you know, my friend Chris Stone, I know that he's using Space Claim sometimes.
Hmm.
That's actually how I learned about Space Claim, but I never actually checked it out, to be honest. But yeah, that's crazy. I didn't know that Michael, I believe his name is Michael Gibson. I didn't know that he worked on Rhino, so that's where.
Hmm. Yeah, 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 he did. He did. Yeah, I mean, it's this is why also like I know my friend who started using Moi. He did some like I tried to convince him to use like like Blender, then ZBrush, then and so on. I tried to learn him, but this was so totally strange for him. And then he just picked the Moi, And then, like without any additional information from anyone, he started doing some really cool looking, speakers, bicycles, with tons of elements, tons of details, and we were all like pretty amazed, like, wow, like how did you do that, So yeah, it's a pretty powerful software, but Fusion, also in my experience, is just like more mature and maybe better tool, but then like one man team, and I guess a lot of folks work in the development of the Fusion here. Is there something new with their pricing? Do you know? I remember I got the license for educational purposes and that kind of stuff, which is kind of free. Not sure if they've changed anything. Is it like, do you have to buy it now, or?
So I think that you do maybe have to buy it now, but I have to look into it. Before, I know that there was this version. It was like, oh, if you only make under so much money, it's fine, and
Mm-hmm.
then you have to pay for it. So I think now though they changed it, so it's like $50 a month for a commercial license.
Mm-hmm.
So
Can you please tell me something about your background? I know that not everyone likes to talk about this kind of stuff, but if you do, or if you don't mind, like, where are you originally from?
I'm from Seattle, Washington,
Seattle.
actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought that you might have some Eastern European background or something like that, maybe.
A lot of people think that. I used to have people on ArtStation like asking me if I was Russian or some crazy stuff like this.
Why
But
do you think is that? Like,
I don't
because.
know. I mean, so my family is Polish and Native
Mhm.
American, so it's
Mhm.
like actually really two far different things.
Oh, you have Native Americans in your family as well?
Yeah, I'm Polish and Native American
Oh,
basically.
yeah, very cool.
It's yes, but anyways, that's why I think maybe
Well,
some
like,
people
then
say
you
they're.
have some Slav blood. Uh,
Yeah, my name most people don't recognize where it's from, so it also helps, but I also won't say.
uh, okay. What about your education? Where did you went
I
to school and?
So I got kicked out of middle school and high school, and then I graduated with a 1.4 GPA, which is like one fourth of like perfect.
So
Um,
not very perfect.
yeah, so not very perfect, and that's my educational background. And then I remember, so I was working in a computer shop when I was 18, and I was like, oh, I really loved building computers and whatever since I was like really young, and so
Mm.
I thought I wanted to do something like IT, and then anyway, I fixed everyone's problems all the time doing computer stuff, and I've been building them for years and years, and I realized I hate fixing people's problems, and so I got really bored and I was in the back and I started messing around with 3ds Max because I was so bored of playing games and doing this stuff. And yeah, so now I'm here somehow. It's an accident. I don't know.
Yeah, I wanted to comment what happened there. Some edges are missing, or what is going on. So, did you go to any design school or anything like that?
No, I
No.
just talk about design a lot. And I learned a lot from Jehoon when I first started getting into design. And I just spend a lot of time studying, why a lot of people are just copying design stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And I mean, nobody's immune to this. Everybody's copying a design
mm-hmm.
subconsciously somehow.
Yeah, yeah.
But, you know, I tried to focus on, I guess, for at least to me, like what the rules are. Like, why do I like this? Not, oh, I like this, I'm going to copy it. It's like, why do I like this? And then find the reason behind it. Like,
Mm-hmm,
what's the underlying structure? I
mm-hmm.
guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. I guess, I mean, in States, I guess it's not so cheap to go to design school, if I'm correct. It's not just you don't just get in by applying your works. There's a lot of money involved in that, right? Because I realize, like, a lot of guys who are from states who came to IFCC in the past, they're all like kind of like talking about how how they still have to pay for their debts, for the money they either borrowed or whatever for the college. So
It's fuck. Yeah, sorry. I
and
mean,
it's
I'm just
like
trying not to swear, but yeah, it's
it's a
horrible.
nightmare. Yeah.
No, I remember. I worked at when I was working at 343. I remember so many people. It's like people who are really good in the industry are like, yeah, I'm still being screwed by school debt. It's the biggest freaking joke. Like
Yeah.
the amount of money that it costs for a subpar education is phenomenal. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I'm $200,000 in debt, and then every single student says, yeah, I learned more on poly count.
Oh Jesus.
Great. It's like what a freaking waste of money. It's
Yeah.
sad. And a lot of people's parents are also dumb, and they push them to go to school, which is
I, kn- but I can somehow relate to this because I know when I went to college, I didn't went to any design. I mean, I did. It was a design, but it's more like a textile design and clothes and that kind of stuff. But and I didn't have to pay because it's different in Croatia. It's covered. It's free. Education is almost free. So, but the thing was like at some point I was like, do I even want to finish this college? Like I'm not so into it. And then it's something like, and I mean, the logic says, yeah, you just go out of it. Don't finish it. Do what you want to do. But then there's some like part like inner you saying, will this mean that you're not like that you can't finish it? That you're not like good enough.
mm,
And then you still like want to finish it. And then in the end I did. But it took forever.
but
So
I mean that's also fair. If you're doing it, and I mean also okay, I'll be honest. If you're not in the US or like some major hub of 3D, it makes sense to go to college, unfortunately, because you need a degree. And it's a bit of a different situation. I grew up in Seattle, which is like it's one of the tech hubs of the United States, and so I had a bunch of big studios around me. I didn't need a degree. There was no reason for me to go to school at all. So it's not always the case for everyone
mhm.
else.
We have some questions here. Let's just check. Okay, you have answered. Why are you not using timeline feature? Alex using the UI preview mode, and why is not using a timeline feature? You answered that already, I think. Question: do you sketch out your ideas on paper? You answered that already. Yes, you do. Sometimes, probably a lot of times. Okay. Well, okay. What is Vital using today? Someone asks. I think he's using Moi. Am I correct? A question: do you find it hard to make changes to existing form in Fusion after the initial form is made, considering the structured nature of how your model thinks, or how your model thinks in the software? Not
I
sure.
see, Kane. I see what you're saying.
Mhm.
All right, so Kane, my friend, let me explain. So basically, you have to know what you can and can't delete. I know for a fact I can delete these two chamfers because they're singular chamfers. Once I start adding more than two chamfers, and usually three is like the limit, so I can actually still delete all of these chamfers here. But once in a while, you'll reach a certain point where it's not undoable. Like this chamfer maybe is undoable, but it's also a horrible mess right here. Personally, I don't care at the moment because I'm just doing some random stuff. But it's really about knowing what you can and can't do. So let me see if I can pull up an example really quick. Um, uh, I don't know. I don't feel super comfortable going through everything. Yeah, I'm not going to. So basically, let me give you an example. So let's say I have a shape like this. Let's bevel it, do something. Whatever. And then I have, let's say I want to do a shape like this, new body. There's a lot of times where you can just mix a new thing and match the pieces together based on a parameter, so or based on like snapping. So like let's say you need to match this bevel, you just
Mhm.
start filleting and then you click the bevel to match. and you can start building stuff. So like if you're pushing and pulling, your objects aren't aligned. You select the face, select
And
where
then,
you want the pivot point from, and then you go to here. And then
mhm.
from there, you can merge these two things together. So I've had a, on this mech I showed, let me see if I don't have it up anymore. But I'll maybe show it at a different time. There's just a lot of situations where you can basically fix your mistakes. Like for example, here you see these two faces aren't perfectly aligned. So what I can do is pretty simple. You just draw a box, pull it down, and now it's gone because I
Mhm.
deleted this extra stuff I don't need. And so it's just really, it's like Max, right? You have to find a way of modeling that isn't super destructive and that you can learn how to undo problems that you've created. That's really the core of it. And I will be going over all of these things in my
Mhm.
advanced fusion tutorial.
Mhm.
The tutorial I released last is just to, get people into fusion.
Mhm.
Like some of the things I'm doing actually at the moment, like three-dimensional cuts and stuff, are one of the things I think a lot of people are struggling with in
Mhm.
fusion. So,
Uh, I- what I've noticed that you're like really fast in this software, and I mean, this is like a typical workflow. You use the some of the 2D tools like for sketching, and then you extrude or whatever. Uh, is there an option? So all these drawings are actually flat. I know there's an option to use kind of 3D curve thing, which can go in space. Do you use any of those anytime?
no, not yet, but I plan to.
Hmm.
Most of the time I'm not needing to do this type of
Hmm.
stuff, but I want to get even deeper into fusion.
Hmm.
The more that I'm in it, the more deep I get into the program. So, I also I have something I haven't really said anything about it, but I came up with a kitbashing workflow for fusion.
Hmm.
And I still have to refine it a bit, but one thing I noticed when Vitali or anybody is using usually, or even just anybody using Fusion or Moe, yes, the Fusion kitbash way, or sorry, the Moe kitbash way of just like using your kitbash library, while it's really effective, um, there's one thing that you can do in Fusion. So for example, I don't want to go through my files. It's not a good idea,
Can
but
you before you
yeah.
say this about this kit bashing thing, uh, what you just did like 30 seconds ago, you imported a model and placed it on the surface with the right orientation, or what was it?
Yeah, so basically what you can do in Fusion, it's not as fast as Moe, but it's
Hmm.
the next best thing. So I have all my Boolean objects open
Hmm.
in different
File.
yeah, in different files and components.
Hmm.
And so I can just copy and then paste it into here, take the object,
Hmm.
go to the align tool,
Hmm.
pick the face,
Okay.
and then so I want to put it here,
Uh-huh.
and then if it's upside down, I hit flip, and then I scale it to how I want it,
Hmm.
find the middle point, and then align it here, and now it's perfectly centered. And then I just do a simple Boolean.
So this is actually how you would align joints, right? For the movable objects that intersect or
Yeah,
like.
those as well, for sure.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, cool. Cool. Okay, please continue. Like the what what did you find out about kit bashing that's better in Fusion?
Yeah, so for example, like let's say, I won't show it exactly right now, but like let's say for example, you have a detail that is like this cutout shape. Well, if you're booleaning, usually you can only boolean one object.
Hmm.
And I always like to have like clips and screws and whatever as separate objects so I can put a different material on them, right? And so using Fusion, and I'll show it later once I've refined the technique and the speed of the technique, but basically I can copy all of these objects and align them all at once Boolean out the part I don't want, and then leave the pieces I do want. So I'm
Mm.
adding the Boolean shape, and then I'm also leaving these screw bits behind.
Hmm.
That yeah. So there's some things that are better, some things that aren't as fast. You know, obviously Moe is awesome for this stuff. So
So like it's also it's not a sin to use one software for one thing and then apply it in another software. Uh, so yeah.
yeah, for sure. But I'm lazy. I don't want to switch between all of these different softwares all the time. You know, it gets frustrating. So I'd rather be able to do as much as I can in just one software.
Hmm. Later on, I'll send you the link to a video uh, with what one guy does. I mean, not just one, like more and more of them. Uh, what he does in the Blender for hard surface modeling,
Yeah.
just to get your opinion on this, but it's not related to this stream. So, what else? Just let me see. Uh, Ulf 3D says hi, Alex. Is there any advice, Emil BDB? Is there any advice you would give to your younger self? So,
Hmm.
advice to Alex who plays video games and only thinks about starting doing 3D models.
Oh shit, yeah. The biggest one, don't burn out. Live your life. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, there's something attractive and enjoyable about killing yourself to get good at something or to, improve at something, but, you know, the most important time of your life, don't ever give it up. Um, I think it's super important to be balanced, you know? The thing is that the idea of, like, I don't know, I know a lot of artists who struggle with this, but this idea of, burnout and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to watch a movie because if
I
I
have to
watch a movie,
work.
yeah, I have to work." And to be honest, yeah, in the short run, it's actually great. You're gonna be getting way better. You're putting in more time. And to be honest, I'm doing this a lot still sometimes, but I realize, one, that's gonna die at some point because you're going to be starving for new experiences so badly. You're gonna feel like a dead person. Even some of my friends who are still working a lot, they're still always taking the time to watch the movies and do things like this just to chill. Don't ever make excuses like, oh, I can't have fun because of this and that. Work a lot, but also make sure that you have time to, grow as a human being. And 3D is not everything. Some people, especially when they're young, they want to give up everything for this. Honestly, it's somehow dumb. Like all of this art stuff, I think it's fun, but it's somehow dumb in how seriously you take it. It's real human experience and real life and people are I think what make the world worth living. But art is just kind of a fun thing. So
Well, when you mentioned this, I agree with you, and this is something that I also agreed with the previous guest in this, let's call it a show. Um, but what's with your like personal life? I mean, you move a lot, or at least you move like big distances. So how do you like stay in contact with? How do you socialize? How do you stay in contact with those who are your friends that you have been like visiting or going out with like for one part of your life, and then you just go like 2,000 kilometers away, and does your like private life suffer because of what you do?
no, I mean to be honest, actually, my life is actually significantly different now than it used to be. I pretty much only worked for a few years, like maybe 5 or 6 years, with no really caring about my personal life and all of this stuff. But on some point, actually, it's funny because it has to do with IFCC.
Hmm?
I was talking to my friend and I said, okay, well, I had some major life changes, and I was like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna go to Europe, and I actually wanted to stay here, but it wasn't really my main priority, and so I said, yeah, I'll go to IFCC because everybody that they know said, oh, Everyone always cancels when they say they're gonna go somewhere. I was like, all right, fuck it. I said I'm gonna do it, so I did it. And I kind of just was traveling since. So I don't know. I went all over the place, but now I'm living here. So
I think it was similar with I don't know if you remember him or if you have met him or if you were here while he was here. The guy, Mexican American guy, Alfonso de la Torre. He he also like he came to our event.
last year?
No, he came. Was the last year your first year?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, then you haven't met him.
Okay.
He was here like I think for 3 years in a row or something like this. So we invited him as to join as a speaker, but before that he was never outside of U.S. And
Same.
so the way that his life changed, we're not in contact that much anymore. But he 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 also moved to Europe in the end, to Bulgaria or something like that, and
Nice.
so many new friends. Total shift in life. He still works like remotely for studios, mostly on films, I think. But yeah, I mean it's a good decision to go. To travel. Meet people. I mean, events are good because you have like concentration of people with maybe similar interests as you, but then again you also have this night part of the event where you just like drink or whatever and
That's my
socialize even
favorite
more.
part.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, so I mean, one of the reasons why I asked you about your social life, because I know, I mean, it's a bit different here in Europe for people who are born here, but in States, at least from the movies I watch, I was there only once and only in New York, but we noticed that like there's a lot of traveling, like it's like almost no one stays where he or she was born. It's all about like where do you get the job, and then you go there, and then you find a house there or apartment, and then after 3 years you move to another state, and so on and so on. So.
For me, it depends where you're living. I stayed in Seattle my whole life. I traveled across the U.S. and all this stuff, but
Mhm.
I spent a great deal of my time in the same place, and I always wanted to, see stuff in the world. I want to see everything if I can someday.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, I don't know, like, people are always watching this shit on TV, like, freaking animals and sorry. Like animals, in the wild and all of this stuff and all these different places in the world, and they're so fascinated by it. But most people aren't, trying to go see all of them. Like my parents, for example. Like I don't know, they didn't travel. I don't understand why. But anyway.
Uh, so just a few words about your hometown. Like we here, like in Croatia, especially my generation, like a bit older
Yeah.
folks. Uh, we heard about Seattle for the first time when I was like, I think, seventh or eighth grade, like 13 years old, and then there was this grunge era, and Seattle was like a place where it was all born. Uh, is this still significant thing in your town? Like, is it? I mean, it's probably not a thing anymore that youngsters follow, but I guess like a lot of students, a lot of tourists still come there because of it.
I have no idea to be
You're
honest.
not, you're totally not into it.
Man, I only listen to shitty SoundCloud rap
Shitty SoundCloud rap.
and Russian music and I don't know soundtracks. So I don't I used to listen to like a lot of rock when I was growing up, but not
Mhm,
anymore. I have no idea. I
mhm,
know that people like Nirvana and all this stuff that they're
mhm.
coming from Seattle.
How many people live there?
Actually, it's crazy. It's only like under a million. It's like 700,000.
That's like Zagreb. That's like exactly
Yeah.
like Zagreb.
Yeah, it's the thing is Zagreb looks smaller a
Hmm.
lot.
Hmm.
But Seattle looks big, but it's not. It's
Hmm.
weird.
Hmm. Okay, let me check if we have any more questions here. I'm burning out as I write this. Okay.
I already know who. I already know what he's talking about. I was thinking about him when actually, yeah, RGZ95. I was thinking about you when I said the movies thing. But yeah.
Okay, and then we have like, will you make also a lower jaw for this rattlesnake head? Yeah, it does look a bit like a rattlesnake.
You can try.
So let's see. Okay, I don't think we have any more questions. And to be honest, I think that it was like 1 hour and a half that we're talking already.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I guess you want to finish your gun model. Unless there are any more questions, and I don't see any new, is there anything else you would like to share with us? Say whatever.
Oh, I don't know. Uh, I'll have a new Fusion tutorial coming out soon because I,
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of people are still struggling with Fusion and like basically how to use it. A lot of people are just going straight into bevels and all this stuff, and
Mhm.
so I want to help people see the value of Fusion because I know a lot of people are jumping on the Moe and all of this stuff. So it's just my opinion. And the other one is don't burn out. Live your life, I guess. Nothing
Uh,
fancy.